In this video, we are going to do our first mocks. We're going to create our first Mockk objects and add them to our Espresso test. So we're going to be using the third-party library known as Mockk. So Mockk is how it's spelled. Typically, people in the industry these days are using things like, probably the most common is Mockito because it's been around for so long. But Mockk is a fairly new one, and I've been really impressed by it so far with the limited use that I've had with it, the limited interaction. But I've never heard anything bad about it. So I want to try and use it where I can because it looks like it's a really great third-party library for building mocks. So in this example, we're going to have an app like the one you see here on the screen. It's just a single activity project. We have 3 fragments. The first one is movie detail fragment, which is the one that you see in view here. And then you have director's fragment, and you also have star actors fragment. So it's a single activity. We're going to be using a Fragment Factory, the new Android X Fragment Factory, to provide some dependencies to the movie detail fragment that it's going to accept through the constructor. So we're going to do constructor injection, and the repository, the data source, is going to be one of those. So we're going to need to mock that out. So let's take a look at where you can get the code, because for those of you who are not following along with the course, you're probably wondering where I can get this code so that you don't have to write so much to keep up with where we're starting from. So if you didn't know, this is all part of a free course on my website. You can go with codingwithmitch.com. It's a totally free course called UI Testing for Beginners. This is where it is. If you want to watch it, you just go to my website and register. You can watch it for free. It's also on YouTube. So the code for this video, you're going to want to clone or download the repository and then just open it in Android Studio. And once you have it open in Android Studio, you want to select the branch Simple Mocking Dependencies. So if I just look for it, I got it checked out. So Simple Mocking Dependencies, check that out, and then you'll be looking at the endpoint for this video, and then you can just kind of follow along as I write these tests. All right, so before we actually write the test, I want to go through the code and just kind of, so you have an idea of what this very small project, this one right here, how it's kind of structured. Because it's important, because we are going to be doing constructor injection. We're providing dependencies. We have a pretend kind of data source that's coming in that we're going to be using. So you need to understand kind of how this is all structured. So first is build.gradle. Let's take a look at the dependencies. We have our Espresso testing dependencies, core and contrib. I forgot what contrib was for, but I think we need it. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Next is Mockk. So this is the mocking library that I was talking about. This is in place of Mockito. We could be using Mockito here, but the reason I chose to use this instead of Mockito, the main reason is by default, all Kotlin classes are final, and you can't by default mock them out using Mockito. You have to add kind of an extra configuration file. So this was just easier. That's literally that's how I stumbled about it. It was easier. Someone recommended it to me, and then I did a little bit of digging around, and people are saying really good things about this mocking library. So I think it's going to be around for a while, and people are going to start using it. So we're gonna use it in this video. And it doesn't really matter. Like if you want to use Mockito, it's fine. It's all going to be very similar. Just there's going to be some extra configuration steps that you're going to need to do. So as we come down here, we have the Android test dependencies. Then we have the Android X fragment dependency. So this is a new one that we haven't seen yet. We haven't really been using it, I guess is a better way to put it. So like I said, we are going to be doing constructor injection with these fragments to provide the data source to the fragments. So we're going to be using a custom Fragment Factory, which we're going to talk about later. And then Glide, of course, just for setting the images. We're not testing anything to do with Glide. It's just strictly for, if you look here, we have an image. So that's setting the image. All right, so that's build.gradle. Now let's talk about how this is structured, because I talked about that custom Fragment Factory thing that you're going to be a little unfamiliar with. First, I will talk about the package structure up here. So we have data, we have factory, we have UI. Inside of data, we have our model object. So this is that movie object, just ID, title, image, description, directors, which is a list, star actors, which is a list. Then we have inside of source, we have a interface that defines the functions that are going to be defined by the remote data source. So it's just a single function, get movie, and that's the one that's going to be called inside of movie detail fragment. So when this comes into view, you can imagine it calls get movie, it gets the movie from the data source, and then displays it. So now let's look into movies remote data source. So here is our, quote unquote fake data source. You can see it implements the movies data source. So it must have the get movie override method or override function for getting the movie from the list of movies. I used a linked hash map here, not for any particular reason. They used a linked hash map in the Google sample, so it was kind of just fresh in my head, and I ended up putting it in. If you don't know what a linked hash map is, it's just a hash map, but it maintains order. So there's nothing really special about it. Well, that is the only thing that's special about it. It has a size of 2, and then inside of init, you can see I'm adding 2 dummy movies to this kind of pretend data source. So we have basically we just have like a static data source here that's simulating what it would be like to get it from a network or a cache or whatever. Then we have, like I said, the get movie function, which gets the movie by searching for its ID. So this is so that's the data source. Now let's go into the factory, because this will be kind of new to probably a lot of you. So the Android X fragment dependency, the part of the fragment section for the new Android X stuff has changed a little bit. They have now the ability to do constructor injection with fragments, which is awesome for testing, because we know what kind of dependencies we need when we're writing these tests. So I created a custom movie fragment factory, just extends Fragment Factory. It takes 2 dependencies, some request options for glide. I just put these in here just to kind of give it a more realistic look. There's no real reason why I did that. And then we have, of course, our movie's data source, which we do need as a dependency because we are going to be using that in a movie detail fragment. So it has a single override method, instantiate, where it just looks at the class name, and then whatever that class name is, it creates the fragment. So if it's movie detail fragment, it creates a movie detail fragment. Director's fragment creates one of those. Star actor's fragment creates one of those. So the only fragment that actually requires dependencies is movie detail fragment, and you can see them being provided to as constructor arguments here. So this is kind of the new thing that you couldn't do before. You couldn't provide arguments to a fragment when you're building it. So this is the cool thing about this new Fragment Factory thing. And then setting up the Fragment Factory is very easy. So up top here, I have kind of like, this is what it would look like if you were using Dagger. You would imagine you'd have your @inject up here. You'd be injecting whatever your dependencies are, or whatever dependency injection framework you're using. Obviously, we're not using a dependency injection framework, so I'm like pretending to inject these things. We have our request options, we have our movies data source, and then inside of onCreate, the first function I call is init dependencies. This function wouldn't exist if we were actually using Dagger or some dependency injection framework, but since we're not, we have to initialize those dependencies because they are not being injected. So pretty simple, just like, initializing that, nothing crazy there. Next, we set our fragment factory. So this is a new thing that you would not have seen before. This is how you set your custom fragment factory and tie it into the support fragment manager for the activity. So you just call it support fragment manager, fragment factory, and then and then instantiate a new fragment factory. Of course, we're passing any dependencies that we need, which are the request options and the movie data source. So notice that I'm calling it before onCreate. I can't remember why exactly now off the top of my head, but there's a reason you want to call it before onCreate. So if you're setting up your fragment factory, you want to call it before onCreate gets called. The layout, pretty obvious. And then init is just, if there isn't a fragment already in view, initialize our movie detail fragment. So the only thing that should be a little different than what you've seen before here, everything's pretty normal, just attaching an ID to the bundle, and then obviously that ID in the fragment is going to be used to search the movie data source. This is different here. So before, with the transactions, the fragment transactions, you couldn't use you couldn't reference the class. You had to like literally initialize the fragment here, and that's how you would add it to the container. But now, because of the factory, all you got to do is specify the class, and then the factory says, okay, what class is this? Oh, it's a movie detail fragment. Okay, I guess I'll just initialize one of those. So that's how this works here. So just kind of know that that's the only other thing different about this Fragment Factory stuff. Next, I want to just briefly look at movie detail fragment. So here is the biggest thing that's new to you probably is this ability to do constructor injection and provide dependencies to a fragment class. You could not do this before. I really like this. This is cool. It's great for testing because obviously then you know what dependencies you need when you're testing fragments in isolation. So really great thing. Just have the movie object because obviously if you look at the screen, we're displaying a movie here. We're getting that from the onCreate function from the bundle. So getting that movie ID, if you look here, we're attaching the movie ID from the bundle. We get that movie ID, then we search our movie's remote data source. So this is a dependency that's being provided up here. We get the movie, we set the movie, and then onCreate view, onViewCreated is called. We set the movie details, which is done down here by this function. And then we just have a couple onClick listeners. So this takes you to the director's fragment. So if I click that, that's this onClick listener. If I click that, that's this onClick listener. Pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure we've had examples like this earlier in the course. So that is generally it. The only other thing is maybe I'd look through directors fragment really quickly because I just want to talk about this function down here. So this fragment is pretty simple. It just gets the directors from the bundle right here. Once it gets them, it then sets the directors to the text view. Pretty straightforward. The only thing I want you to pay attention to is this string builder for directors function. So it inputs an array list of the directors, and then it outputs, it uses a string builder, appends a new line, and then outputs that string so that it can be attached to the text view. So instead of, writing, like I could have just taken this up here and done SB, SB.2, oops, oh, what did I press there? SB.2 string. That would have worked exactly the same, but the reason I wanted to use a companion object, create a function that did it for me, is because then it's easier for testing. Now, all I got to do when I write the test is I got to call this function, set it to the text view. It just makes it more streamlined, less likely that we're going to make a typo or a spelling mistake, something like that. So that is all of the fragments. That is the activity. That's the fragment manager, the dependencies, all the things you need to know how this app works. Now we can write the tests for it. Okay, so let's go into the Android test directory. Actually, no, sorry, we're going to go into movie detail fragments because this is easier to generate the test. I'm going to right click, go to generate, go to new test function, generate this test function, and now we can write this. So no, I don't want to add that to Git. So opening this up, we have our run with JUnit, Android JUnit 4 runner class. And we're going to write a single test function here, and we're just going to test the overall functionality of this fragment. So basically, when this fragment comes into view, we want to test, the title. We're not going to test the image. I believe I've already talked kind of extensively about image testing and things like that. We're going to be talking about that more in the advanced course, how to actually test images more thoroughly. So in general, we just want to see, like, is there a title? Is the description there? Are these text views there? Is the correct data retrieved from the remote data source? So we're going to have to mock the remote data source, basically. All right, so what are we going to call this? We'll call it test is movie data visible. And I'll close this to give me some more room here. So what's the first step here? Setup. Let's see. We need to build our object that we expect to see. So in other words, we need like a movie that we're going to be testing. So let's say movie ID equals 1. We're going to set a title equal to the rundown. So I'm going to be copying from one of these movies here. Basically, I'm copying one of these movies. I'm going to copy this. All the attributes of this movie is what I'm going to be using in the test. So actually, I'll leave this open, and we can just copy paste over a whole bunch of stuff. So the next parameter here is going to be the description. So value description, and now I'm going to go over to our remote data source. I'm going to copy this entire description so I don't have to type it out. Go back over to our test, paste that in, and I don't want all of these things. Interesting that those. I'm going to redo that. Hold on. I think I'm not sure what I did there. There we go. I think I already had quotations that screwed up. All right, so next one is going to be value. We want to create this movie. So movie equals movie. Get that import. I want to do movie ID is the first parameter. The title is the second parameter. Then I want to do an image. So I'll get the image from over here. If I go up to, where's the image? Right here, this guy right here, that's the image. And these images are all hosted on one of my servers, so they're available for free for you guys for testing. If you want to use them in your other projects, feel free. So there is the image. Now the description. The next is going to be the array list of the directors. So I'm copying that over here, pasting that in. And the last one is going to be the array list of the actors, so pasting that in. So there's kind of our test movie object. This is what we're going to do to pretend that we need this in the UI, and then pretend that and make sure it does get set to the UI. So now comes the mocking part. So again, if I was using Mockito here, I would not be able to do this easily because Mockito can't mock final classes, and all Kotlin classes are final by default. I would have to use an extra configuration file, or I could use some other workarounds. Some of you might be familiar with the open for testing workaround that you'll find in the Google samples, or you could build out an entire fake repository. That would also work. You could like literally build, fake data source or fake repository, whatever, and stub out all of that information. But I think using this library Mockk is really great, so we're going to give it a try. So value movies data source equals mockk, so Mockk, and the type is going to be a movies remote data source, and just initialize that. Now I want to define what happens when functions inside of this Mockk are called. So it's basically like saying every time movies data source dot get movie is called with this movie ID, then we want to take some action. So I want to say returns this movie. So anytime this on the remote, the movies remote data source get movie is called, we want to return the movie. That's all we got to do. Our Mockk is completely set up. So pretty cool, pretty simple. Now we need to set up our dependencies that we're going to be providing to our fragment. So we have two. We have the request options, which you saw inside of the fragment. So request options. We have a placeholder r.drawable.default image, should be default image. We need an error image, r.drawable. Also do default image. This stuff actually isn't really important, but just we need the object to be able to pass to the Fragment Factory. So next we need our Fragment Factory. So we aren't going to be mocking this. We're actually creating a real Fragment Factory here, a real movie Fragment Factory equals movie Fragment Factory. Now we want to provide those dependencies. So request options and also the movies data source that we just created using our Mockk. I'm going to scroll down here to give us some more room. Now I want to create the bundle because we need to pass a movie ID to the fragment so it can be so it can actually find the movie that it needs to find. So put int the ID, or the key will be movie ID, and then the value will be the movie ID that we defined above. Now we want to launch our fragment scenario. So scenario equals launch fragment in container, and we need to pass some dependencies here after I define the type. So movie detail fragment, and then we want to pass the fragment arguments, so that's going to be the bundle, and then we need the fragment factory. So factory equals fragment factory. So now that should handle everything that we need, and now we just need to verify everything. So coming down here, say verify on view with ID. Probably have to get some imports here. Get those two, r.id.movie title, and I want to check, so .check if this matches, get that import. I want to get the view assertions one, make sure to get the correct import with text, and I'm checking to see if the text matches the title. So if everything works correctly, if our Fragment Factory does its job, if the correct movie ID is retrieved from the bundle, all of that should be verified. Next, I just want to check one more thing. We're going to check the description. So r.id.movie description, check matches with text, and we want to do the description. So again, we're not going to be testing the image. If you take a look at the fragment, we have this image here. We're not going to test that. It's definitely a more advanced thing. There's a lot more involved, and we're going to be looking at that in the advanced course. So if you want to know more about that, just kind of stay in the loop, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, go to my website and register. You'll get an email when the advanced course is done, and then you'll see things like that. So that is our first test. It looks like we have an error somewhere. I'm getting some red up here. I'm not really sure. I don't see any red on the side here. Oh, this should not be a comma, should be a plus. Oh, I accidentally copied the image into the description. There we go. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so that's our first test. We can actually run this one just to see if it passes. So I'm going to right click, go to run, and let's just see if this one passes. But we are going to be writing tests for the other two fragments as well. So star actors fragment and also directors fragment. Whoops, looks like the test started. So as soon as this test's done, we'll start looking at those other two. And it does pass, so we can move on. All right, so let's go into our test package again. Android test. Well, actually, let's go into the main package, and I'll just right click on the class. So directors fragment, scroll up to the top, right click, go to generate a new test class, click OK, click OK. No, I don't want to add that to Git, and I'll minimize this, and we will write our next test. So let's just give me some more room. Alt insert test function, and this one is going to be called test is directors list visible. So the first step here is given. What's given? We need to define the director. So this is kind of like our expected value. We have an array list of The type doesn't matter here, it will be implied. I just want to copy exactly what we had in our remote data source. So again, we're going to be testing this, this rundown. So we're going to copy this array list of directors. I'm going to paste this in here. That's our expected value that we need to see. Next, we need our fragment factory equals movie detail or movie fragment factory. And our dependencies here are, they actually don't matter in this case, so we can do null and null. They don't matter because if you look at the directors fragment, there is no dependencies passed to the constructor. Therefore, there's nothing we need to mock. There's nothing that's going to be used in this fragment, so we can just pass null dependencies. We don't care. Next is the bundle, so bundle equals bundle. Now we want to attach the extra, so put string array list extra. This key will be args directors. And I can pass that directors that we defined above. Now I want to create our fragment scenario. So scenario equals launch fragment in container. The type here is directors fragment. And inside here, our arguments are fragment arguments. That's just the bundle and then the fragment factory. So factory equals the fragment factory that we defined. That should take care of pretty much everything. Now we just need to verify that the correct things are in view. So verify, and on view, get that import with ID, get that import also, r.id.directors text, and I want to, oh, missing an import there. This should be, there we go. So next line, I'm going to do check. I want to check if it matches, getting the import, making sure to get the view assertions import. I want to check that it matches with text, that last import, and then directors fragment dot string builder for directors, and then passing the directors. So again, just remember that function inside of directors fragment down here for generating the string that gets displayed in the text view. I'm calling it here to make sure that I don't make any spelling mistakes, I don't have any typos. I'm calling the exact function that's used to set that value to the text view. So just basically confirming that if a list is sent through the bundle to the fragment, that is in fact the list that gets set in the correct format in the view. So now let's do the last test. That's going to be the movie stars or movie actors. Where I'm going to go over here, go into star actors fragment, right click, generate. We've done this lots of times before. Create that test. Okay, here's our new test class. Open this up. Let's give us lots of room. I'm going to actually copy the test from directors fragment because it's mostly the same. So I'm copying that test, pasting this in. Okay, now we just need to change a few things. So I'm going to go into the movie's remote data source. I'm going to copy the array list of actors, go into the star actors fragment test, going to paste this in because now we're expecting actors. We're not expecting directors anymore. Again, we don't need any dependencies here because if you look at star actors fragment, there's no dependencies being passed. We need to attach a different value to the bundle. This is going to be arguments, actors. And then I want to pass the actors right here. I want to launch the fragment in the container. The arguments and the factory are the same. Now I just need to do the assertion. So this will be the star actors text, I believe is the ID. View assertions, view matchers, yes. This will be now star actors, or is it? Yeah, it's star actors fragment. And then we have a different string builder. So string builder for star actors and then passing the actors. So same kind of exact thing. I can get these static imports just to clean this up a little bit. But it's, like I said, it's pretty much exactly. We're checking to see if the string builder correctly builds the string that gets displayed into the text view. I don't like the way this looks. That's fine. Oh, I forgot a couple other things. We need to change this to star actors fragment, the type up here. And what else? There was something else I thought I forgot too. We have star actors up here. Oh, we can change the name of this too. This should be is actors list visible. So just changing the name of that. All right, so now let's run these tests. Let's run the star actors fragment test. So right clicking, going to run. Let's see if this test passes. It shouldn't take long. There, that does pass. Now let's go to the directors fragment test. Right click, go to run, and let's see if this one also passes. There's that magical green check mark that we all know and love and hope for every time. So that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful. I just wanted to make sure that I introduced Mockk in a realistic way, in a way that you're actually providing real dependencies to classes. Just like in this example, we have movie detail fragments. We are doing some constructor injection, adding some dependencies, even though they are fake dependencies, they are still dependencies, and using Mockk to mock those out, provide them, and make sure that we see the correct behavior. So now in the next video, the next one's going to be kind of taking this example one step further. So right now in this app here, I'll just run it again just to kind of remind you of what it looks like. So we have our movie detail fragment that comes into view. We have director's fragment, star actor's fragment. And the next one, we're going to have a recycler view. So we'll have a recycler view. If they click an item on the recycler view, they'll get taken to a detail fragment, which will look exactly like this, and then it'll be the same. So it's like taking a step back and adding a layer, which will be where the recycler view is. And we'll have it's going to be everything that you see in this one, but scaled up. So we'll have, recycler view testing stuff. Obviously, we'll have to still use that Fragment Factory to provide dependencies. We're still going to be using Mockk, kind of just a bigger picture, I guess, a more practical picture. So again, if you don't know where to watch the rest of the course, just go to codingwithmitch.com and you can go to courses and search for UI testing for beginners. It's completely free. Just register and you can watch it there or watch it on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.